every opportunity going for them. Everything. You know, the amount of learning infrastructure that we have, from whiteboards, learning materials, curriculum, resources, phenomenal. Every opportunity available to them. Okay? The richest kids in the world. But where they were poor was their aspiration. Was their resilience was really low. Whatever, oh, my mobile phone is broken, so the world is against me. Okay, oh, my friend, someone has defriended me from Facebook. Oh, my world is falling to pieces. Okay, no, I'm not trivializing, this is a big state, you know. So that's why I called it poverty of aspiration. The kids in Uganda I was working with were highly aspirational, but living in poverty. The only barrier Julius had to go to university was to find the fees, about $800 a year. The national, the income per capita for the year is about $500 a year, 400 to 500. He's from an impoverished family. How's he going to get to university? Maybe he'll get a scholarship. Maybe he'll get a scholarship. Whereas the kids in the West that I work with, okay, every opportunity, but they are impoverished. They have no aspiration because the resilience isn't there, and the resilience isn't there because of the fear that we've programmed into them more. And so the two paradigms are interesting. The first is, this is what I call passive dependence. This is where, again, look at the characteristics. First, reliance on others and systems. So what we do is that the system will protect us. I am completely powerless. I let the whole system dictate to me how I behave. I've allowed myself to become disempowered. Blame culture. So when problems happen, they're not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. And that's further compounded by conflict. Okay? It's not my fault, and it's those people who are different from me, it's their fault. The view of the self as ineffectual to bring about change. I can't really do anything myself. Nothing changes. Someone else will do it. Someone else is going to come and fix this light. Someone else is going to come and fix this computer. Someone else is going to fix my life. I don't have to fix my own life. Often delusional, i.e., you know, no pragmatism, no realism in terms of what you want to achieve. You know, when an individual wants to go onto a singing show and they can't sing at all, that's a prime example of that. Safety nets. It's an interesting one here. Too much safety net. That families, for example, provide too much safety for them, so therefore they know if I don't succeed or if I don't work hard, at least I'm going to be protected. I'm not going to be hungry, I'm not going to be starving, etc., etc. And in the West we have a lot of welfare. I'm not against welfare. I think the people who are genuinely in need of welfare should have welfare. But welfare, sometimes it creates a dependence. That dependence that takes away a natural desire to work. We become easily controlled and compliant. No sense of purpose, what we call false self-actualization. That is that the meaning, basically, that, oh, I've got a really great life, I don't need to do anything more. So you settle for what you have. You're also, this paradigm is also a very individualistic paradigm, and a very materialistic paradigm. And I take it for granted. People just seem to think that they don't have to work hard to become rich and famous. It'll just happen. It's very delusional. This is a kind of passive dependence kind of life. I didn't see any of this in Uganda. I didn't see any of this in Uganda at all. What I saw in Uganda were people who were this, okay? Proactive, independent, self-reliant, resilient, tough, emotionally very, very strong. Despite losing, imagine losing your parents to HIV and AIDS, living in absolute poverty. But you know, they had this first thing, I am the tiger. Does anyone remember what I am the tiger means? Okay, anyone? Anyone know what I am the tiger is?
A big
one. Ali, do you know what it is? You're smiling. You know what I am the tiger? Remember? I'm old. It's a song, okay. We won't get anyone to sing it, don't worry. And it's from a film. What film is it from? Rocky. Which Rocky? Rocky 3. Okay. Now what happened in Rocky 3? Let me tell you what happened in Rocky 3. Okay. Rocky 3 fell into passive dependence. Rocky came from the streets. In Rocky 1, he was hungry. He was raw. And he was so focused on what he wanted to achieve, had ambition. Yeah, ready to struggle and sacrifice. By Rocky 3, he'd become lazy. He becomes sloppy. Okay, he had also developed lots of fear, you could say. And Clubber Lang, who came from the streets, was hungry. He had the eye of the tiger. That's what the whole point was. You know, and so Clubber Lang comes along and he whoops Rocky. Rocky gets beaten. Now Rocky gets beaten up, and he gets beaten up bad. And Rocky can now decide, I'll give it up. I'll hang my gloves up. Let me get out of this game. But no, rather what Rocky decides to do is that he has that resilience. He realizes, I need to go back to how things were before. He needs to go back to that active, that proactive, independent, self-reliant paradigm. I've got to take responsibility. It's up to me. It's not the world is against me, or it's me against the world. I've got to take responsibility. So he goes back, and he goes back to the old way of doing things. He rebuilds himself. That is why what we need. So it's about survival. It's the whole idea of direct causality again. No one to the rescue. I've got to do it myself. It's up to me. Personal responsibility. Accept accountability. It's just me. There's nothing for free. No props and no false aids. I remember reading a book once called The Way of the Warrior. And The Way of the Warrior says, regardless, you've just got to train hard and be prepared for every situation. You can't say, I can't do this because I need a bench press machine to do this. No, you've got to do it, whatever you've got to do it, just do press-ups or whatever. The point is that don't rely on anything. Just do it, and do it as much as you can. Self-control and discipline, understand the idea of predictability and consequence, teamwork and partnership. You'll find with this paradigm, you recognize how important other people are and cooperation is towards achieving your goal. Creative, let me tell you one thing about Julius. And I developed this theory around Julius. Okay, what I found about Julius, and I've told you the story of Julius. Julius emitted a positive energy. When I saw him, I was impressed by Julius. So I decided myself that I'm going to help Julius. Because you can that's the only thing you can come to when you're impressed by. Let me give you a similar situation about resilience. I met a person in a seminar like this, and within about a minute, I realized I want this person to work for me. I wanted to deliver some sessions for me and workshops for me. She just gave out such a positive energy. She uplifted me when I was in her company, made me feel really positive. And I didn't even notice the wheelchair that she was in. She's in a wheelchair. She's been in a wheelchair since the age of 3. But she just got so much positive energy. It's interesting, she said, everyone sees the wheelchair first and me last. Okay? But by the time they're talking to me, the wheelchair is invisible. She gives that energy out. And when someone gives that energy out, you're attracted to people like that. And then you think, like I said, I'll give you a job. That's all right, I'll give you a job. In the same way when I meet a person like Julius, the law of attraction is such that when you meet someone like Julius, and this is why I'm saying people are not powerless, and ideas are powerful. Because this is how people change, because the idea attracts people to you because of the energy of that idea. And so resilience is fundamentally about that, is that when you take personal responsibility of your life, and you have this attitude, okay, of emitting that positive kind of energy, as a result of that, you attract goodness to you, and you attract like-minded individuals, and you create this cooperative ethos around you as well. A few more slides and then we'll take a... Okay, 5 minutes? 5-minute break now? Yeah. Let me just see what the next slide is. Okay, yes. All right, let's just do this last slide and then we'll call it, we'll have our break. Okay, unfortunately, one of the problems that we have is that we really have got used to changing based on a reactive paradigm. And we've got to change this ourselves. So for example, the only time we change is when an outside force dictates this to us. So fitting in, being accepted becomes more important than being ourselves. So the point is this, that you change because you see that it's the correct and right thing to do. Also, we have this attitude, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Okay, and the real reason we change is because of fear. Fear, the ultimate external motivator. Fear is an important motivator. But if fear is the only motivator in your life, the fear of negative consequences, the fear of competition, the fear in university that as a result of not performing that I'm going to be chucked out, or can you see that that is not something which creates the positive kind of mindset, an emotionally resilient mindset. The real reason, the motivator for me to change is because I'm doing the right thing. Okay? This is interesting. What happens with the reactive paradigm? Okay? Looking good is better than being good. Does that make sense? With this reactive paradigm, I have to look like I'm good. Not that I'm actually good. So looking good becomes more important than being good. Most leaders believe that people are willing to change only in times of crisis, and this leads to the most pervasive leadership strategy that creates a crisis, or at least a perception of a crisis. People become accustomed to waiting for the next crisis and more open to creating the next crisis. Does that make sense to everyone? That, people create crises themselves, and then they change. Don't do it. Be more proactive. Stop the crisis from even occurring. So therefore, I won't do anything until a crisis occurs. Rocky, well, everything is fine. A crisis occurred. Okay? But then you went back to the appropriate paradigm. Okay, I hope that's been interesting food for thought. We'll take how many minutes break? Okay, let's take 10 minutes break. We'll have a final session, a few more slides, and then the rest is going to be open up for questions and answers. Okay, 10-minute break, everyone. Okay, I really want to give more time for questions, but I think it's important in the presentation that I talk a bit about, the psychological problems. So I'm going to go through this section quite quickly. Now, yesterday I mentioned the statement, silence kills. What I mean by silence kills is that many individuals will have, at some point in their life, some kind of emotional distress. It's not unusual. It's not something to be embarrassed about. I feel, certainly, from a Western point of view, and different societies cope it in different ways. So some people, they probably will have an emotional problem, but they don't recognize it's an emotional problem because they're embarrassed about it. Yesterday we spoke about the fact that mental health as an issue has so much stigma attached with it. So that's when people actually have a problem, they are not prepared to talk about it. And until the problem becomes unbearable. And that's why we mentioned yesterday that, when you look at suicide levels, Korea, unfortunately, has one of the highest suicide levels in the world. So what that shows is that people, and suicide, men are more successful at suicide than women at the first attempt. The reality is, for many of these men, they've been dealing with a mental health problem, with depression, with a psychological problem for many, many years of their life, and they haven't gone and spoken to someone about it. They've dealt with it silently until it comes to a point where things are unbearable. They attempt to take their life and they're successful at it. So that's why silence kills. If you're going through emotional distress, the most important thing that you can do is to talk to someone about it. And the person who's listening to it, that's why we began with emotional intelligence. The person who is a listener has a responsibility. Look, you're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a doctor. I don't expect you to solve the problem. But what you can do is play an important role, as we'll learn, which is about channeling that person, referring that person to someone who can help. Support that person. Make them feel cared for, be compassionate towards them. And that will go a long way to protecting and safeguarding that individual. Silence kills. What is self-harm about? As I mentioned with the paradigms, that paradigm that the world is against me leads to what we call self-harm. And self-harm is, again, a universal thing. That people, men, and self-harm, regrettably, is much more common in females than males. So what is self-harm? Self-harm is a way of coping. That's what people talk about, with painful and difficult feelings and distress. So many of the people I work with who have self-harm, and the most frequent is usually cutting. So someone will take a knife, cut their arms, and puncture themselves with the knife. Not in a badly enough that it will leave marks, but not badly enough, because they know exactly what they're doing. Badly enough that it will leave a mark, a scar, but not so bad that it means going to hospital. Because if you're going to hospital, then you've got to explain why you've got massive cuts along your arm. And there's lots of other ways, but cutting is a very frequent one. And people describe to me that, you know,